Welcome, 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 everybody. We are the Chicago Creative Coalition. This is the Passion and Purpose track, artist speaker series. We enrich, educate, and inspire creative lives. My name is Linda Levy. I am the president of C3 and the Midwest agent for the workbook. And I'm so thrilled to welcome Mary Rafferty tonight. Mary works as a Chicago-based commercial photographer. She began her career as a photojournalist and continues to draw from these roots as a storyteller with her current work and personal projects. The majority of her work is collaborating with entrepreneurs and companies, creating fresh and modern imagery that tell their story. In addition to her commercial work, she has ongoing personal projects that she is passionate about and keeps her engaged with different people she meets on her journey. Rafferty's ongoing photography project, Do You See Me, explores the personal histories, strengths, and points of view of African American women in Chicago. This project and much of her prior work spotlights the challenges of being a woman in America today by combining storytelling with portraiture to explore women's resilience and strengths, and by sharing the challenges they face. Through the intimate process of both collecting and sharing these personal stories, Rafferty's work captures moments that document women's experience in contemporary social and political time. As a white female photojournalist, Rafferty feels compelled to bring greater equity to the images of women in our culture and is inspired by the stories of the women she has met through this project. Together, they create the collaborative pieces that ask, do you see me? Mary.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, C3. This is, as I've been on some of your calls before, such a warm and welcoming, enthusiastic crowd. So I'm excited to be with you. I am going to share my screen with you. One second. There we go. Can everybody see what they're? It's just my logo.
Yes.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so before we get started, I want to pose two questions to you, and you can share your answers in the chat or not. It's up to you, but do write it down so you can refer back to it. If time permits, we can share the answers at the end and talk about them. So the first question is, what is it like to be you? Super broad question, but you can talk about it, on a broad scale or really specific. Like I take my dog for a walk every five times a day. I have, 10 cats, whatever you want it to be. I'll give you a couple minutes and you can also work on this while I'm talking as well. And that answer you can put in the chat if you feel like sharing. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next question for the sake of time, but feel free to put that in the chat at any point as I'm talking. Second question, what have you felt, when have you felt not seen? So misunderstood, invisible, not acknowledged, whatever that means to you. Okay, so feel free to continue working on that. And thank you so much for doing that. So how did these two questions relate to personal projects and your passion and purpose? So for the first question, what it's like to be you, I have gotten this advice time and time again. Document or work on what is closest to you. What is in your world, your family, friends, neighborhood, hobbies, work. And this is a great place and source to start with to develop a project for yourself. It is likely to be the least path of resistance, and it truly may be more interesting than you think. For the second question, when have you felt not seen? This speaks directly to my Do You See Me project and many of my projects, and this can spark some creative ideas and often could have a real purpose behind it. For many reasons, people feel not seen, and that is important to reveal, explore, understand, and maybe give it a platform if you choose. Even if it's not a personal project, it can be the way you choose to spend your volunteer work, so this can apply in different ways. Oops. So I'm here today to talk about how I use my personal projects to use my passion for a purpose. And I want to start off by just letting you get to know me a little bit through my recent work, and then looking at a few of my earlier personal projects that helped to then inform and shape my current project, Do You See Me? And hopefully this will help you understand a bit of how I ended up where I am now. So this first work is my ongoing studio project called Fabrication. I really just do this project for the fun of it, allowing myself complete creative freedom. My main parameters for this project is it's in the studio, using color on color or pattern on pattern to create portraits with energy, style, and some fun. No green screen or dropped-in backdrops. All of it's done in the studio. These are portraits of mostly complete strangers, acquaintances, friends of friends, and a few friends. It was a way for me to have a lot of fun in the studio, but also to set some parameters to create a cohesive body of work to add to my portfolio. So far, I've done most colors, lots of patterns, seersucker on seersucker, paisleys, zebras, gold lame, and of course, polka dots. Still looking for, if you're interested, purple, brown, silver, floral on floral, camouflage, palm trees, you name it. So the first portrait I did was the upper left-hand side, the polka dot portrait. And that was probably a really good, happy accident because she was a delight to work with. But I had just met her at an event. She was a guest at an event I was working at, and she was actually wearing that shirt that she has on in the portrait. So I invited her into the studio and we started to work out this idea. I then saw Jen, the yellow portrait, at Pitchfork Music Festival in the Jackie Chan shirt, and instantly I knew she needed to come into the studio. So sometimes it's the outfit that inspires me, and sometimes it's the person. And with Jen, the yellow portrait, it was both. A lot of people are not comfortable approaching total strangers. I get it. Most people make excuses assuming that the person's going to say no, they'll think they're creepy or just weird. But you would be surprised when you approach someone with courtesy, confidence, and a real plan. Many say yes, and it does go easier with practice. This is Grace, my amazing intern from a few years ago. She was just about to go back to college and wanted some technical help with her gear. So of course I set up a shoot. Instead of throwing up a gray backdrop, I decided to, piggyback on this idea and do a red portrait. So it was really great that I was able to work with Grace, get a portfolio out of it, and she learned a lot in the process. So always try to piggyback when you can on any projects that you have going, whenever possible. This is Paula. She's a friend of a friend of mine, and I just needed to capture her amazing Brazilian energy. These are two portraits, but we did quite a few that day. And this is Kirby. She's a comedian and actress. She came into the studio for headshots and a library of images for her work. And this is the exact scenario I wanted when I create work for myself, that someday someone will come in and say, hey, I love that. Can you do it for me? So that's kind of the point. And this is Harold Green. He is an amazing poet and performance artist. If you have not experienced him, you should. I'm sure he's doing a ton of online stuff. And if at some point soon we can see live performances, he's your guy. He's amazing. He actually came into the studio to do an editorial shoot, nothing like this. I happen to know he had an amazing inventory of suits. So I had a few setups in the studio. We talked through and I shared images of the backdrops I wanted to use, and he showed me his suits. And so we worked after the editorial shoot. We did a few, he gave me some extra time and we did a few setups. This one I think is especially successful, but of course it did do a green portrait with Harold Green as well. And Linda and Kathleen really wanted to show this one, so I did. I also do portraits of working women. My goal is always to tell their story and convey a little personality when I can. I do a lot of corporate work. If I have extra time with the subject after getting the expected shots, I'll take some time to create something that's not as expected. And the client usually appreciates that. This is Lindsay Liss. She's a local neon artist, and this was an editorial assignment. Oh, and this is Kathy Lancaster. This is a branding shoot for her. She's a super talented painter here in Chicago. She has a beautiful gallery on Addison Street here in Chicago, if you ever want to check it out. And it was just so much fun to bring out like her work and her amazing Southern charm. So, and this is more corporate work. You know, I always try to add a little levity when possible. This was a shoot for a nonprofit. Here is Francesca. She works as an executive for McDonald's. We were there this summer at their headquarters on Fulton Street. And, you know, after we got all the safe shots, I asked if we could do some more fun shots. And she said yes. And the beauty of that is McDonald's ended up purchasing this image and many more. So I think when people are feeling it, it shows in the portrait. And this is also another really good example of hiring a good team. The people I work with, I'm so fortunate, are talented, and they're definitely invested in me. And so when we're on a really tight schedule, we're able to have the flexibility to do stuff like this because I work with these people that are so generous with me, meaning like my assistants, digital tax retouchers, and hair and makeup. So really have to put a shout out to them as well. So that's a little of my current work. And now I want to go into a few past projects to show the progression to my Do You See Me project. I just want to back up a little here and talk about why I do personal projects and why they're so important to me as an artist. So when I came up as an assistant, I had many photographers I worked for that I respected and really admired their talent. But I also realized it's really easy to get stuck or burn out if you're 24/7 doing only for hire work, nothing that is generated 100% by you. I felt a real need to preserve that spark that we all have when we know we have something that is our passion. I want to go all in. So I started doing these personal projects more seriously and approached them more like I would with a client job. You know, I often heard from other creatives, I'd love to do that, but I just don't have the time. I do think most of us do have the time. We just have to carve it out and get over the obstacles in our head. For me, if I'm able, I always pick my slow time. Historically, it was in January, and a lot of creatives find themselves with too much time on their hands in the winter months. Not a great combo. So if you can look at that downtime as an opportunity to be creative, then those long winter months or slow periods go by faster and something wonderful can come of it. And lastly, the art of the personal project is a crucial element to let potential buyers or clients see how you think creatively on your own. So while you might be doing it for yourself or a cause, you can also use that work to show your style and how you think creatively. So this next project, as you can see in his shirt, was with Circus Steam. Sorry, I don't know why this does this to me. Circus Team mission is to unite youth from diverse racial, cultural, and economic backgrounds and help them build self-esteem and mutual respect through the practice of circus arts. So my son had been in their summer camp, and I picked him up on the first day and was so impressed by the way they spoke with the kids, disciplined them, and taught them this great circuit tricks. I, of course, brought my camera and asked if I could take a few pictures. I then started a conversation with Circus Team. They, of course, were delighted to have someone come in and take pictures of their performances and fundraisers, which I was happy to do, but I was interested in curating a collection of images that captured the kids in the programming doing what they do well. And additionally, to start a project we could build on as the kids grew up in the program. The kids that are in the after-school program start working with their main troupe that does paid performances, and then they have the opportunity to get scholarship money for college. So being able to show the success story I felt was a powerful tool for Circus Dean to raise money and funds, and was more interesting to me than just taking photos of an event. So don't be afraid when doing any pro bono work to dictate some direction on how your services can be best used. I actually chose to come to them and use their large theater curtain as a backdrop. It was a lot of work logistically, but well worth it in the end. I really feel the consistency of the curtain ties the project together as well as sticks with the circus theme. So in early 2011, I started a project called Derby Life. And Derby Life celebrates women and the dual lives they often lead. It explores how women's roles are changing and what it looks like to be a career woman, a mom, a sister, and a grandma. And yes, there is a Derby grandma. I have always been attracted to what makes individuals do what they do. I found the lives these women are leading to be inspiring and intriguing. So, like I said, in 2011, I found myself at the Windy City Roller Spout. I had taken my two sons. My oldest son's fifth grade teacher was on the Derby team. Within a few minutes, I found myself sneaking down in the ring to take photos. It was really exciting and visually amazing. T.S. Eliot was the instigator for the project for me. She's pictured here. She was the blocker. I wanted to push the opponents out of the way so that her teammate, the jammer, could make it around the rink to accumulate points. At first glance, I was terrified. I would definitely lose that fight. But after further investigation, I felt, yeah, she could punch me or maybe make me an apple pie. So there was this really sweet element to her. And it turns out T.S. Eliot is a librarian by day who's a lover of T.S. Eliot. So I wanted to show the extraordinary commitment these women had by leading more than full-time jobs they're passionate about, but had a rigorous practice game schedule that they were deeply committed to with an evening persona as well. What made them so driven and committed to do both? And I felt it was a great metaphor for what most women are juggling in their lives. Well, what I liked even more about these women is that they had a lot of fun doing it. Here we have Jailer Roberts. She's an undercover police officer who speaks Arabic by day and Jailer Roberts by night. And here is my son's infamous fifth grade teacher, Brooke Fly by day, and Brooke Fly by night because she's fast. And Drew Grit, who is the mother of these three adorable boys, but also a very talented writer by day, and Drew Grit by night. So what came of the Derby project was several group shows and a small book of the diptychs coupled with quotes from the athletes talking about what Derby means to them and why they're so committed to it. At one of the group exhibits, I had made a short film with audio of one of the Windy City roller bouts. I really love the sounds of Derby and wanted to have that as part of the experience while viewing the photos. And looking back on it, it was a great way to get my feet wet and explore introducing audio and video as part of some of my personal projects with very little risk. And this brings us to my ongoing portrait project, Do You See Me? I started this project in 2016, where I invited Black women to collaborate with me by asking them all the same question: what is it like to be a Black woman in the US today? I have them write their answers down on a piece of paper in their own handwriting, where I then digitally overlay their answers on their portrait to create a collaborative piece. I knew I wanted to set parameters to make the pieces visually cohesive, so over time I settled on these. All the images would be black and white with the studio setup on the same backdrop, asking all the women the same question. And I do have a couple portraits I just love that looked fantastic in color, which I did show at the exhibit, but they are a bit of outliers. So even though I love them, I had to edit them out. And I definitely could have just turned them into black and white, but the color is what was working best. So how did I end up exploring these ideas? In around 2008, I had been privileged to a lot of conversations around race and stories of extremely unfair and unjust situations that people of color had been subject to. So what I wanted to do was to be able to put a spotlight on these stories I felt privileged that they were being shared with me. And so I wanted to show their inspiring stories, their heartbreaking stories, uplifting and thought-provoking. So initially I was going to call the project Conversations and have it shown in predominantly white neighborhoods where white folks could experience the exhibit and start the conversation that was much needed. What happened was even better than I could have imagined. But first, let me show you some of the work. Here pictured is Robin Robinson. And hopefully, I'll just pause a minute if you haven't read it already. Are we good? Did you guys read it? So that first line, being an African-American woman in the US today feels like an emerging during an emergency. Raise your children while trying to raise a world that will embrace them. It says a lot. Here's Megan. So she says in the beginning, today being a Black woman means to be born naturally into this deep, enriching sisterhood that dates back to the beginning of time. This was one of the themes I really wanted to have the participants touch on. I had always been intrigued and impressed by the strong sisterhood among Black women, and I wanted to know more. I really did not want to lead or influence the individual, so that is why the question is so open-ended. But I wanted them to use the question as a platform to talk about whatever is most important to them. And here we have Chantel Branch. I believe she's joined us this evening. I didn't get a chance to sift through everybody. Chantel, are you here? If you are, you can unmute.
Hi, Mary, I'm here.
Yay! Can you welcome? Thank you for coming.
You are so welcome. How are you?
I'm great. So this beautiful face is attached to this voice you're hearing. Chantel, can you read your statement first for us?
The tones of my beautiful pigment is natural. I am a beautiful woman.
Thank you. It's so much better in the participant's voice. And I just love that statement and your look. I definitely see you. I just wanted to ask you a question that I asked everyone else. Do you have a time when you have felt not seen?
Yes. I mean, there are several times in my life, but I will go back to the first time that I felt that I wasn't seen. And that was, I was in 8th grade, about 14 years old. And I was the only African American in my class. I was new to this particular school. It was a private school, and I just did my best to be the best student, to, you know, be liked by my teacher. Like, I did a lot of things to be liked by my teacher, but it just, nothing I did would ever make her happy, even my grades. And I would get, you know, all A's and maybe 1 B, and even my grades or my handwriting. It was just nothing that I did to impress her, or even just for myself to, you know, have good grades and take home to my parents. Nothing that I ever did or said. We used to sing a hallelujah song in the morning. Nothing I did ever, not necessarily impressed her, but even just made her see me. You know, and she would only see me in correcting me to maybe sit down, have a seat, maybe stop talking, but never see me in my achievements or the things that I did, or just as a young African-American girl on her way to high school.
Yeah, she's not acknowledging you and not seeing you for who you are.
Yes.
How did that make you feel?
For me, it was a few feelings of emotions. Definitely, it was the realization that, hey, I am a young African-American girl. I've heard of racism, I've heard of prejudices, I've heard of, you know, things that have happened in the news, but this is the first time that I'm feeling this. I don't like the way that this feels, and not being able to have those conversations about race or about the color of my skin. it left me maybe apprehensive and not knowing what I needed to do or how. For me, looking back, I realized that that was just the beginning of something that would happen over the course of my life.
Yeah, and in that eighth grade, that's a really hard thing, well, at any age, to digest.
Yes.
Is there anything that you, as an adult now, are able to do differently to either change how you let it hit you or how you interact in the situation? I mean, and if you don't have an answer, that's totally legit.
Well, I mean, just have to read situation by situation. Some are just not even worth, talking to or wasting your time on. And then others, especially when it comes to school or when it comes to work, definitely advocating for myself, especially with me having 3 daughters, advocating for my daughters because they experience it too, even now, just in, different ways, but advocating for them and not being afraid to advocate for them. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I do now.
That's great. That's amazing. I mean, that you're teaching them that. And so you have 3 daughters now?
I have 3 daughters and I just had a baby, so I have a son now.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Chantel, thank you so much for joining us and for saying your words. I really appreciate it. And it was
You're
really
very
good.
welcome.
Stick around if you can.
Okay, thank you for having me, Mary.
Excellent. So here we have Ashley Floyd, and in her own words,
double the strength, double the tears, double the fight, double the might.
Short but to the point and so true. Ashley was actually the director of Chai Cat, the art and tech incubator, where my solo exhibit was shown. So leading up to the exhibit itself, I came in to do some Do You See Me portraits for the project at actually Chai Cat in their space. So it was a great way to be able to include those hosting the event and other people that may be part of the community. And I can include them as well as part of the show. This is Kalani alum. Kalani is a student at Chai Tech Academy here on the south side of Chicago. And I had approached the school to collaborate on some images. I knew that they had a really strong art program. So I sent them an email and waited, and eventually sent them another email. And then I got exactly the response I wanted and was hoping for. Not only did they want to work together, but they wanted to create a field trip to come to the studio. So they also had writing work that they weaved into this leadership program they have. So the girls had really dedicated time to work on their answers. So it was really successful. Tiara Wheatley is the Chai Tech High School cultural liaison and assistant principal. So she's also brought in 2 more groups of sophomore and junior girls, and then also their summer program girls. And so it's just been wonderful to work with these young ladies and drawing them out. And with Kalani, it was this in-between moment that worked best to show her personality and her confidence. I'll just give you a minute if you needed to read the rest of her statement. I'm intelligent, determined, charismatic, and considerate. It's amazing. So early on, I did a small artist talk for ASMP Networking Night, which is a American Society of Media Photographers. And as I'm up in front of everyone speaking and showing some of the images, I wanted to make sure everyone could read what each person had wrote because they were projected images. So I started to read each portrait. And immediately I realized I wanted the words to be in their voice and definitely not mine. And that is when I started recording audio for the pieces that came after that. And had I not taken the opportunity to present my work on pretty early side, I don't know if I would have come to that conclusion as to so soon as to add the audio. So it was really good to, sometimes if you have the opportunity to push yourself and do things, that are outside your comfort zone. This is Tiana Tucker. I was trying different things to enrich the experience, engage the viewer, and overcoming the obstacle of it's hard to read the pieces. So this is actually a video on my website. I'll play for you. It's called Listen.
Being Black is hard. Being a woman is hard. But being a Black woman is powerful. We're underrated, hated, and imitated. Although Black women struggle the most, we're the strongest. We carry the pain of everyone else on our shoulders without showing weakness.
And I have to give a shout out to Isabella West, who helped me with the collaborating the words and video. So I think she's on the call, but thank you. So these words are so powerful, but her opening statement really hits me. Being Black is hard, being a woman is hard, but being a Black woman is powerful. It's pretty amazing. I think she's a sophomore. And this is Courtney Francis. This is a great example as to why I kept the question open-ended, which is really difficult to answer, I realize. But Courtney made a powerful poem about who she is while also being scared.
I am hopeful. I am scared. I am proud. I am scared. I am my family. I am scared. I am curious. I am scared. I am productive. I am scared. I am successful. I am scared. I am loved. I am scared. I am funny. I am scared. I am political. I am scared. I am nurturing. I am scared. I am a Black woman who was always in the company of her ancestors. I am no longer scared.
That's amazing and beautiful. Here is Shaniqua Davis. I'm going to play this in her own words.
Being a Black woman in the United States feels like being the underdog who always finds a way to come out on top. Beauty, brains, and attitude. There's something about being a part of this amazing tribe that no other group could imitate. It feels amazing to be a Black woman in the United States today.
Beauty, brains, and attitude. So with every portrait, I read their answer first and then start to work with them and collaborate and find the right mood and gesture while trying to pose them in a way that there's room for the words. And what happened with Shaniqua is it was kind of farther in the project and I just was getting bored. It would have been easy for me to do like a really nice tight shot with her hoops and her arm and be done with it. But, I'd done that already. So she kind of, with that dress and the sleeve, reminded me of a modern day superhero and the beauty, brains, and attitude. So I just decided to use her dress and her form and, weave the words around her. So boredom can be a good thing, at least in my work, because this happens often when I get bored. I just start to try to change it up and make it interesting for myself. This is Ariel Hobson. So she was one of the Chi-Tech Academy high school students. And these are her words, sorry.
Being a Black woman in America is a mixed blessing. I'm proud and confident of who I am and where I come from, but it doesn't feel like the world accepts all of me. They pick and choose what they like and put me down for the parts they don't.
They pick and choose for what they like and put me down for the parts they don't. She's a sophomore in high school. I mean, that's a lot for anyone. Here we have on the left, Joy Edmonds and Monica Green on the right. Joy works at my dermatologist's office, so it really left no stone unturned. I'll give you a couple seconds to read her piece. So being a Black woman in the US feels like a heavy burden. I know for a fact that she works with a lot of white clients predominantly. And so to have that feeling like she has to be breaking stereotypes and being this particular type of person at work is just exhausting. But I was very thrilled she came in, even though she didn't want to get her picture taken. She wasn't excited about, being on, in front of the camera, but I think she felt a reason to come in. So I was really grateful for that. And Monica Green on the right, she actually is worked with Earth Heart for some of the fundraising for the event. So she came in to one of those Chai Cat days at the incubator, and we made a portrait there. So I was really grateful to have her. This theme of your ancestors, like the foundation of my ancestors helped me through, has been woven a lot through a lot of the answers that I got. And I really love how this community takes that and makes it, builds them up and makes them stronger. It says a lot. And, it comes up a lot again and again and again in a lot of these answers. So we, of course, need to end this series on love. This is Love McPherson, and here are her words in her own voice.
On the playground as children, we sang about girls being made of sugar and spice and everything nice. Well, Black girls require additional ingredients: strength, courage, tenacity, creativity, perseverance, humility, insight, fearlessness, and sprinkles of petty and sass. The Black woman is an intoxicating, addictive mixture of awesomeness.
Yes, they are. I met Love for the first time when she showed up at my studio. She's exactly what you see here, all smiles and laughter. And I was so grateful for this amazing energy. It truly was a gift, her and her daughter. So she was just a delight. But so like I mentioned before, this project initially started out as an idea of conversations, how I felt I had been privileged to some honest, open conversations around race. And I felt more white people need to be part of the conversation and hear this and listen. So the initial idea was to have these pieces with their words to potentially exhibit in white communities and have events around the exhibit to facilitate the conversation. What happened instead was more than I had envisioned. I had been working with Earth Heart, creating Do You See Me portraits with their moms in Inglewood at the Peace House, which is a kind of like a community center. And Earth Heart's an organization that uplifts moms in Inglewood and Woodlawn area here in Chicago, so they can then uplift and help their own communities. So it was kind of a nice partnership. Dee Dee had contacted me from Earth Heart, invited me to show my exhibit, Do You See Me, at their fundraiser and to work together. So in June of 2018, we had an opening night exhibit here at Chai Cat, the Arts and Tech Incubator on the South Side. The beginning portion was experiencing the exhibit and then gathering everyone for a panel discussion for some real conversation. It was amazing. The crowd was perfect. White and Black men and women showed up. So many things were happening in the exhibit and the room that evening. There were really important conversations shared. Those on the wall on the stage were being seen and heard, but also we had the celebration of these women, who they are, and their gift of their vulnerable and powerful words. I also wanted the audience to be able to participate after all what they had heard and seen. I wanted for them to be able to be seen and heard. So this is a wall I created within the exhibit for anyone who could write down their answers to what does it feel like to be you, and hang their answer on the wall. The first portion of the evening was much like what you see here, people reading and absorbing the statements and portraits. I was really pleased to see the level of focus and quiet that people had to take in the work, and it felt just really intimate. And we had a lot of fun. By the end of the night, after sharing serious conversations on race, being seen, Chicago, what you should do if you want to help and not do, we all ended up having a beautiful evening together of joy and laughter and sharing. And this was how the evening ended. I also have to acknowledge the event photos here. These beautiful photos were done by my talented and generous friend, Mariah Carson. She's one of those great team members and good friend that I mentioned earlier. So here we are today. So this next project, these images are from this past summer of 2020. It's called Finding Gratitude, which is a collaboration with Art on Sedgwick. And Art on Sedgwick is an art center and storefront that is part of the Marshall Field Garden Apartments. That's my dog. A subsidized housing complex in the affluent Old Town neighborhood of Chicago. So I initially met Charlie Branda, the founder and the Jill of all trades of Art on Sedgwick, in January of 2020 at an exhibit and fundraiser for Art on Sedgwick. They have different artists collaborate with their kids in the program to create art. So I just mentioned to Charlie at the time if she ever needed some help, I'd be interested. And then in late May of last year, she contacted me to work together. So in the spring of 2020, just as the pandemic had surged, we decided to work together carefully, documenting the residents at the Marshall Field Garden Apartments on what life moments they had missed during the pandemic, funerals, birthdays, graduations. I came for one day and continued to book more dates for portraits throughout the summer. The project idea quickly turned into a project of what they were grateful for. Hannah of Art on Sedgwick had been asking each person, how are they feeling right now? So during each portrait session, she would gather that information and we used some of those quotes on the portraits. The final project hangs on an iron fence that surrounds the apartment complex, which locks outsiders from being able to come in. So this is allowing Art on Sedgwick to continue their mission of connecting their diverse community through art, even while their in-person programming is currently on hold. So it's important to note that the apartments is a large, almost one city block in length, subsidized housing complex directly across the street from luxury single-family homes. And the neighborhood is quite racially and economically diverse. So the regional goal here is the community outside of the apartments to get to know the community inside the apartments. But it also lives as a source of pride for the Marshall Field Garden apartment residents that they get to see every day. These are along Sedgwick between North Avenue and Division on the fence. These are metal prints, so they hold up pretty well to the elements. There's another section on that same street, down the street a little bit. This is Thomas, and he says, some days, to be honest, I don't know how to feel. I just don't. After work, I often go to Jules' parking lot, sit in my car and just reflect on how valuable life is. So I was trying to figure out a way. We were taking portraits in the courtyard, and I just immediately for the beginning portraits, I had to figure out how it was all going to tie together. How are we going to know this was Marshall Field Garden Apartments? So around the entire courtyard and the whole complex, they have these beautiful brick archways. They're kind of iconic. And so I decided to always use those as the backdrop so that if you ever lived there or had been there, you would recognize it immediately, which was so great because on social media, someone messaged me and said, I used to live there years ago. I'm so glad good things are happening there. And so they immediately, of course, recognized the backdrop. Here on the left, we have the Smith family, sisters, with, as you can see, 3 distinct personalities. And on the right is Denilah, and she says, my favorite thing about school, the spinny thing, I miss it. And Gabby, her statement says, when lockdown started, at first I was confused, not scared. When I saw how the cases were, I got concerned about the people who could have it and stuff, family members. The only places I went were to my house and the gas station to get ice because I'm obsessed with ice. On the positive side, in the summertime, August, all I did was paint until I ran out of canvas. So I had several takeaways from this project. So yes, it's important to do personal projects, and that's what I'm promoting today, and flex your creative muscle. But during the initial lockdown, I knew as a documentarian that I should be documenting what was happening in my life and around me during quarantine and the months that follow. I knew from past experience, if I didn't record the day-to-day, what was right in front of me, I would regret it. It would be images that I would never again be able to recreate. But I just wasn't up for it. I was not in the right headspace initially. And even though I knew I'd regret it, it did not feel right. I had so many ideas in my head, some really good ones, but I still wasn't up for it. It felt more like a burden or a chore and not an outlet for self-expression. So I listened to myself and gave myself the space I needed. What was so great about the initial difficult decision is that it freed me up to be available a couple months later to work on this project and to really give it the time and attention it needed. Also, I learned that sometimes you have to let go of your process. I'm diligent about my schedule and timing for each portrait, the ability to contact the person and have discussions about what they're going to wear, what to expect in the process. In this project, I really had to rely on the people I was working with and have a little faith. People were sort of scheduled, but not exactly. But after each session, the word started to get out and we had more people coming to participate. And lastly, this is something I try to tell myself all the time, but I am not always successful at it, but keep shooting and keep creating, not exactly knowing what the final outcome will look like. I had no idea exactly how this piece was going to evolve. So I just kind of had to really be okay with not exactly knowing. And here we come full circle. After the events of this past year with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others, I decided to interview a couple of participants in the Do You See Me project to see how they felt about the question that I asked them years ago and their answer now. This is a small excerpt from the video. This is Tammy McCann, a jazz singer, who is revisiting her original answer to the question, what is it like to be a Black woman in the US today?
To be a Black woman in America, you live your life under the perceived notions and expectations of others. As a vocalist, my goal is to make a connection with my audience through the musical story I share. I want to awaken a moment in time for them, a memory we can all relate to in that one flash of time. The lens through which they see me will strengthen or lessen that connection. That's interesting. I think there are 2 points here, one that hasn't changed and one that has. The one thing that has changed is the lens through which they see me will strengthen or lessen that connection. One that hasn't changed is that the perceived notions and expectations of others, that will always be true because I'm a Black woman.
Yeah, that was Tammy. It's really great to work with her again and have her share and revisit. So this project is still continuing. 2 summers ago in 2019, I did a few Latina students for the project, and I really do want to open it up to all women. So that's exciting. Just a few takeaways, just to summarize my main takeaways about how I help stay passionate about my personal projects and to stay passionate about what I do every day as a creative. To carve out time to work on a project just for yourself, to allow yourself to have full creative control to express yourself from your own personal style and to grow as an artist. Second would be to treat it like a job, not like something that can be just put on the back burner until you have time. Set parameters for the project so each image idea looks like it's a part of the same idea. Don't be afraid to have multiple ongoing projects at once. A great teacher that I've had and of art and the personal project is Aline Smithson of Lenscratch, and she's always said, treat each project like a piggy bank. And as you go, drop a coin in each bank as the opportunity allows. And I love that idea of feeding each project like you would a piggy bank, and then as you're inspired. And lastly, use your talent to give back. Okay, so that's a lot about me and my work. If we want to open it up, look at the chat and see if anyone answered the initial questions, and some Q&A too. I'll stop sharing. I do want to do a quick picture of your beautiful faces. So say cheese. I never say that as a photographer. So that was just. So Linda.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. Can we just have a big like, yay?
That was fantastic, Mary. It's inspiring and teaching at the same time.
So inspiring. I want to go to the circus place and touch those red curtains.
Still doing what they're doing. They're still there.
So if you have a question for Mary, put it in the chat and I will bring it to the group.
There was a question earlier about where do you get your backgrounds?
Oh, the ones that you saw on the fabric. So a lot of them, believe it or not, like the fabric ones are Joanne fabrics. It's crazy what you can find in there. And then the rest of them are seamless, the paper backdrops, like the plain ones are just paper, which would be like a photo store like Dot or Pro Gear.
I actually have a question, Mary. Have you ever considered doing the parallel project with men?
I have. What I initially thought of is I would do Black women and then do Black men. But then I realized over time that that's two completely different projects. But just men in general, sure. Why, if it'd be fun, I'd probably learn a lot.
I think it would be so fascinating because you so beautifully bridged the gap from being a white woman to photographing Black women. Just being a woman to photograph any man could be really fascinating. Please do it.
Yeah, I'll have to work on my special skills. See if they are interested.
From Jennifer, I would love to hear how you introduce yourself to strangers who you would like to photograph. Like, what would the script be?
It's funny because I don't have one, but I clearly can talk to anyone. But what I do get nervous and I just ignore it because what I want to do is way more important than if I'm nervous or not. So, but usually I'm super like chill about it. I don't want to sound like too aggressive or too assertive. I'm just like, hey, oh my God, I love your look and I'm doing this project and you're great for it. This is what it is. Like if they have a minute, and then here's my card. I'd love for you to come in the studio. And then I might say something like, oh, unless you're comfortable sharing your information, I'm happy to email you more about the project. And then, maybe they share, maybe they don't.
From Timothy, did you use MUAs, stylists with all your personal projects?
0, nothing. It's usually just me. When I went to Chai Cat, the incubator, that was a lot of hauling of gear. So I had an assistant and then my intern at the time, she was documenting a lot for social media. But yeah, it's usually just me because I can't afford it. It's a personal project.
From Kath, wonderful presentation, Mary. Do you ever have any challenges in places like the Marshall Field Garden project, safety and permits? How do you navigate those logistics?
That was sanctioned by the Marshall Field Garden Department, like property management and the main person who runs. So I had the okay there. they were asking me to come. Yeah, the first day was hard. Somebody the day before had gotten shot and killed at the apartments.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And so I was trying to play it cool, but the kids were like spinning around the community area, the courtyard, and the energy was weird. And I said something, and they're like, yeah, everyone's pretty upset, and they're going to have a vigil later tonight, and we're afraid something may come of it. So you're going to have to cut this short. You know, the vigil is like at 7, so I had to make sure I get out of there at like 6:30. But that was the only, I don't know if I felt scared. I had a couple people that really knew what was going on. But you know, I needed to not be stupid. You know, I needed to pay attention to what's going on.
Wow.
Should we look at some of these answers?
Yes.
All the time, I've literally had clerks walk away from me in stores like I was not there. It's terrible, but yeah, I mean, part of me thinks that there's ways to like make a project out of some of these things, you know, like there's so many angles to take, but like interviewing some of these people, if you can get it, or, you know, obviously they're not seeing you, but, or recreating that in an image, and somehow someone else says in a room full of men, which is, I was hoping that was changing. What is it like? Oh, that's Linda. This is so true. I like to listen to what is on everyone's mind and to dance as often as possible.
You could make a picture out of that.
Yeah, you could be my project.
I love Alicia Dale. What's it like to be me? Bubbling with ideas and almost always enthusiastic and willing to help where I can. You know, we should just go dancing, Alicia.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't get any better than that. That's great.
I would say that's true about her.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Something like my sister said, I felt unseen when I was the only female administrator for a private college, and when I was the lone female executive for a company, I was often dismissed.
Or when you walk in with a male assistant as a photographer and they assume he's the boss. Where do you find these fun backdrops?
Yeah, she answered that one.
Yep.
Yeah, Joanne Fabrics mostly. They have great, but I also go to when I can, if I'm near another fabric store, I'll kind of check it out. There's stuff online too.
Mary, have you thought about doing, you know, because you went back and asked some of the women that were part of this, your passion project, that question, and have you thought about doing another show with the new, answering that question again, you know, today?
No, the video is short, you know, well, it's not short for video. Video is like 3 to 5 minutes, but this is like 10 minutes. I think a lot of the women would, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but a good amount of them might have the same answer. You know, this has been going on. It's just that it's now in the news more, you know. I can't say for everyone, but the people I've asked, you know, that's the general consensus. I don't know. It's a good question.
I love the notion of strength through the ancestors. Is there a project, the women who articulated that, I would love to know who are their ancestors? What do their ancestors look like to them today?
Yeah, like even there was an amazing high school girl, really confident, really had a strong presence, and she said, "I come from kings and queens." You know, they're going back to their ancestors in Africa and various places, and they're celebrating it as they should.
That would be such a great, I would love to see what it looks like. Like that's a whole nother project. Here are my ancestors.
Oh yeah,
Boom.
definitely. I think of Carrie James Marshall's work, the painter. He has all those different scenes. Really cool. Anybody else?
Mary, this is Dale. I have a question for you. Did I understand that right? That when you talked about them answering the questions, you had them answer the questions, and then you took the picture after you saw the answers to their questions?
Yeah, I usually try to have them send it to me even before they showed up at the studio. But since it's such a hard question, a lot of people delayed. Not everyone, some people were amazing. And so they might actually write it at the studio before we get started, or have what they're going to say in their head and then write it out. And then I read it and talk about it. The people that came in alone, just like one session at a time, we would really talk and everybody would cry. I mean, we shared so many stories. Because I'd read the statement and we'd just start talking. So
I looked at those pictures, and it looked to me like you took the picture and then those words kind of supported that picture.
So their face.
So the fact that you had that information and then you took the picture, how did you do that? I mean, what was your approach to, you had their words and now you're going to try to create an image, because it just seemed to match so well. I was wondering how you did that in that order.
What do you mean, the image and the pictures matched, or just the way they were laid out?
You heard what they had to say and then you took that picture.
Yeah, we would talk, but I would often say to them, sometimes I'd ask questions because I wanted to make sure I understood properly. But I would say if it was a really serious statement, I would say stuff like, so obviously we're not going to do a real smiley picture here. Think about, and then I would maybe read one of their phrases that really stuck out. And I would say, think about that. And this is a collaboration, and 75% of the people wanted to collaborate, wanted to give control, what their vibe was. So they wanted to not be misunderstood either. So it was, I did work with them and give them suggestions and read their words back to them and say, I want this feel. But it also, I think they really understood what it took to make the portraits too.
You would talk to them as you're taking pictures to try to get the expression that you're looking for.
In between, we would start and I kind of talk to them, and then we'd stop, and then if I'm not getting what I wanted, we'd talk some more.
Oh, well, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sure.
Here's an important tactical question. How do you stay focused on your passion project when paying work pops up?
It's hard. And so usually what happens is, to get started on a project, you need that kind of downtime where maybe you're not busy. That's the hardest part of my project, is to start them and get the momentum. And then in like April, May, and June before the exhibit, I was busy. I had just had surgery on my leg, so I couldn't walk. All this stuff was happening, but there was a hard work ahead, but all the ideas and that kind of creative juices and the really hard concentration on the project was done. And then I just had to do the physical work. But so I try to do the projects when I have a little bit of downtime to start them off. And then they kind of, not autopilot, but they kind of, I know what I want, and I have to spend less time on getting people in and creating the work. So the beginning process takes a lot. And then after that, it eases up. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. Tracy Brown.
Fantastic. So fantastic. Thank you, Tracy.
All right. Well, I think we're good, right? How are we?
Mhm.
Can't wait to see your next project, Mary. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank everybody. This was great and a lot of fun. Hope you did too.
Yay.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much.